Welcome to News Compass. Now, competency-based learning refers to the system of instruction, assessment, grading, and academic reporting that are based on students demonstrating that they have learned the knowledge and skills they are expected to learn as they progress through their education. Now, the general goal of the competency-based curriculum or learning is to ensure that students acquire the knowledge and skills that are deemed to be essential to success in school, higher education, careers, and the adult life. If students fail to meet expected learning standards, they typically receive additional instruction, practice time, and academic support to help them achieve competency or meet the expected standards. But the primary problem to Kenya's dream rollout of the program is the standoff between the Kenya National Union of Teachers and the Ministry of Education, with vicious war pitting the union against the ministry, with the union proposing the implementation of the program in 4 years' time in 2023. And with the 844 system faulted for being too exam-focused and on the white-collar jobs, can the competence-based curriculum remedy the education insufficiency in the country? Be part of the discussion. 40920 is the short SMS code, and the hashtag on Twitter is News Compass. We'll sample some of your feedback later. And in the program, I'll be joined by Akello, Misori, who is Kupet Secretary General in the country, a key stakeholder, has enough experience to tell us from his perspective what needs to be done going forward. I do thank you for joining us on the program. Akello, Misori, thank you. Good evening. And on my immediate right is Dr. Juma Mukhwana, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya National Qualifications Authority. I'm coming to important issues that pertain different angles that we need to tackle this from, which pertains to what we have at hand, and that of course includes the reforms that needs to be undertaken in the technical and vocational education and training sector. Importance of the CBC curriculum to the country, reforms in the university sector, with Magoha calling the mushrooming of universities perhaps as the focal point of what we're channeling out not fitting into the job market, and how that need to be remedied in the country. Akello, Misori, I'll first start with you on this important note, and it's equally important that we start in 1985, because that is the point where when the country instilled in the 844 system of education in the country. What was meant, of course, the rollout was meant to address the education insufficiency in the country, but the system was later realized to be too much on exam-focused and on white-collar jobs. Considering that the country channels 500 to 800,000 Kenyans to the job market every year, has it remedied the education insufficiency in the country, looking back into history?
I may not comment much on whether 844 has addressed the education insufficiency in the nation. But it would be an understatement to indicate that 844 has not served us well. What has been there from the onset is that there has been a lot of comments and a lot of comments related to the fact that it did not prepare the graduates well. And these comments were there because when you look at the way the 844 was structured, it was structured to be more practical oriented, but it later turned out to be more theoretical than what it was supposed to be. So that was the major issue. But the fact that the graduates are not competent enough, it is an understatement.
Okay.
What we need to look for and look at in this circumstance is that you look at the needs of the nation, the needs of the 21st century, and how the graduates enter into the job market, how they become innovative, whether they fit well into the realities of the day. I think that those are the issues which now call for a reform in education. But by all standards, what has happened is that the 844 that we cry about was mutilated severally, to the extent that it did not now address the needs for which it was created. Remember, the 844 was also part of the creation of a second university. More University, for all intent, was created as a technology-oriented university. But you may realize that towards the year 1990, the university had been transformed into more social science-oriented, and therefore the purposes for which it was created did not now address the reasons. So that is the reason for which you are saying, yes, 844 has served us. But the needs of the 21st century now require that we refocus our philosophy of going forward. How do we look at work? Do we now look at just jobs which require people to report, to fill forms, and maybe to relate with books, or to relate with papers. We must now say we have got a nation which must go focus to answer questions of food security, which is not here, because 844 had agriculture as a component, had technology as a component. These things were all now washed away. Now going forward, for youth now to address the needs of 21st century, we must refocus our attention. And that's the reason for which those who are against the competency-based curriculum may not have understood the reason for which we want to change from 844 to this new reality.
Okay, now you have mentioned an important aspect, but what's equally crucial and important is the bridging aspect to leap from the current position to the next. The government has outlined the importance of the competence-based curriculum. I'll come to you, Dr. Mukhwana, on this important question. But the blistering sort of attacks, the ping-ponging between the Kenya National Union of Teachers and the Ministry of Education appears to be again the hampering point of what needs to be a smooth take-off of the new curriculum in the country. How do we need to solve the difficult question at hand and equation amicably, in the sense that we have an approach that is all inclusive and brings all the stakeholders on board?
Let me step back a little bit, because I think before we brought in the 844 system, we had a different type of education. We had the 7-4-2-3, where you had 7 years of primary and then 4 years of secondary, then 2 years of advanced level, and then we did 3 years at the university. And if you look at that system, I remember when I joined the universities in the late 80s, the total university enrollment per year was only about 1,000 students.
Across the country?
Across the country, all the faculties, because we only had one university in the country. And the population was growing. So if you think about it, if there's one thing that the 844 system did for us, was that, you see, the people who reached Form 4 and went to A-level, only very few of them managed to go to university. The 844 opened it up for the number of students, because now many people reached Form 4, and then they were eligible to join university. When I look at it from a regional point of view, if you look at East Africa, Uganda is still using the system we had here. Tanzania is still using the system we had here. We have had many more people going through university, for example, because of that opening up. Coming to the competence-based, so what I would say is the 844 may have its issues, but it served us in terms of massification, giving opportunities to people from even marginal areas to access university. The challenge that we've had with 844 and what Mheshimiwa Misori has said is that the problem with the 844 has been that let me give this analogy, that you have a fish, you have a monkey, you have an elephant, and you are putting these people or saying, on your marks, get set.
Go.
What is the exercise? To climb the tree. To climb the tree. Who is going to climb? So what we are trying to say with the CBC is that we are going to look at the talents of the person. If you're good at music, if you're good at sports, then the system identifies those skills. And because you see, in this country, we have this thing called school dropout. And we also have people we call failures. In CPC, there's no failure. Because what we are saying, we are taking what is your talent. We are taking, you see, you can be, these brothers of ours that run and win gold medals.
Or play football.
Yes. You can, if you give them a Form 4 exam, he may get a D. And in your language, you describe him as a failure. But if you give him football, what Olunga was doing, he plays well. So what we are saying is, in the CPC, we are looking at what you are good at, what the gift that God has given you. And that is what excites me. In terms of the noise that is there, what I would like to say is, you see, education has many stakeholders, from students, from parents, teachers, teachers' unions, and others. You expect that in an area where we have a lot of stakeholders like those, not all of us can agree every day on everything. So that is very well expected, and I don't think it's a bad thing, because then it means that it gives us ideas from every sector that enables us to roll out a system that is really works for us. That's what I would say.
Okay, given that, and you echoed Akello Misori, coming to your Kupet, you echoed perhaps sense of support for the competence-based curriculum in the country, alluding to the fact of backing up your point that in the 21st century, in the era of science and technology, we need this to challenge or remedy or address the problems that we experience in the job market, where we have graduates being channeled out, but they are unable to fit into the job market. But again, going forward, then the SETS plan despite the government remaining, the ministry remaining extraordinarily sanguine or optimistic about this plan, it appears not at a point of diplomacy where it talks to, of course, to the stakeholders. And here is perhaps what Secgen Nat says, that is Wilson Sosion. It sounds, I quote him, strange and unprofessional for the CS to purport to be launching the national curriculum policy that will anchor the CBC before the summative evaluation of the pilot phase of the curriculum is conducted to establish whether what was piloted is better than what we had before. He meant the 844 system. And the minister in 2012, Mutula Kilonzo Senior, the late, of course, was objected to the Professor Douglas Odhiambo Task Force report in 2012. Despite wanting to move on, there appears to be forces who support and still think that the 844 system has worked for the country.
I don't think we are going to have competition on matters of change, because change must be resisted by all sorts, but for people who do not believe in it. That is the first thing that I must indicate. The reasons for which the Douglas Odhiambo report were rejected was because we as a nation are very democratic. When majority of the people reject something, does not mean that they are right. We have reasons for which my brother here has indicated, and because as practitioners we must be very objective on where we want to go and how we want to reach there. And if you are talking about that we have not had the facilities that are required, when will we have some facilities? I want to use myself as an example, that when I went to school in the early 70s, I learned under tree. And for 4 years I was under tree, and I am here as the General Secretary of Kupet. And I graduated and became a teacher. In this era, in point, we still have parts of this country where you cannot still raise a class. But we must have a country which is competitive in the region. We cannot, by all intent, try to suggest that because a summative evaluation is wanting, therefore this change is not desirable. That one, let us agree. Secondly, we need the government which is supposed to drive our development agenda has already indicated that this is the way to go. We as people who are moving in the vehicle, and as a teacher, I'm a number. I have seen that the vehicle is going. What I need to do is to ensure that I get hold of that vehicle, get in and start charging the fares. That is my role in this regard. We have had circumstances when if we have to make things move, then we must show way. Let me indicate that the issue of curriculum change is not something which has been born out of the fact that we have a new CS in the name of Professor Magoa. This is an issue which has been dealt with by the late Mutula Kilonzo. Ungeri started it. Professor Ungeri started it. We have had it with Professor Dr. Matiangi. We had it with Ambassador Mena, and here we have Professor Magoa. One thing is, we have had occasions where this is the most discussed change. Because when you look at the 844 itself, it was a product of a survey conducted by Professor McKay from Canada. When he gave it to the former president, he said, aha, this is the way to go. We can now celebrate the large number of graduates who have been churned from our public university is courtesy of 844. But now we are here, we are saying, this thing has served us. But is it relevant for the 21st century development? We have realized that sports has become a very big industry, both here and in Europe.
Of course.
At that point, that's a serious element. Now, this competency-based strategy of delivering a curriculum is providing pathways, which my brother said. We do not need to have a very expensive education where it only celebrates failures. But, for example, if people are good in farming, let them specialize in farming. That is the essence of competency-based curriculum. And I think that is so good.
Having mentioned that and the fact that its importance is what you have highlighted or outlined, there are equally those who say, I'll come to you, Dr. Ari, there are equally those who say that or might not be willing to jump onto the train that you have mentioned to be part of the moving wave. So how is their voice going to be considered regarding their opposition? And you have equally pointed out democracy, because their voices need also to be counted before we make that leap forward.
That's, I think, what I've indicated, that over the democratizing our processes will bring in dissenting views. And with the media also focused on only picking the bad aspect, where the people disagree. I cannot, in where I sit, try to deny people to express their views. But in essence, as we talk currently, the essence of rollout was discussed in 2018.
Okay.
In early this year, when we began, before the Cabinet Secretary for Education left, that is Dr. Matiang'i, we agreed that we need one more year to have a pilot in the stages which were conducted in 2018. And therefore, this year, we are there. And there's an agreement that this rollout is not going to be full scale. It will be gradual as things move.
Okay.
And therefore, as a government, we expect government to prepare the teachers, to prepare the materials, and to develop an infrastructure for this rollout.
And that is
but the focus will be that at the end of the day, we will be having something which we will admire as a nation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the fear is that many have apparently points out to this essence of the infrastructure and whether that can withstand what's forthcoming, despite saying you have more than 90,000 teachers by the Teacher Service Commission.
Just
again, it brings in the fall.
I want just to say this.
Okay, the question.
That in this regard, I would wish to ask Kenyans to look at this that nouns will remain nouns.
Okay.
Verbs will remain verbs. Because language is going to be part and parcel of this system.
Okay.
If you're going to teach mathematics, it will remain mathematics. The strategy of delivering this curriculum is what is there.
Okay.
And the key person here, whom I think is very crucial, is the teacher preparedness.
Okay.
But I want also to announce and to indicate to the whole nation that there is no teacher who is specifically trained for a specific curriculum.
Okay.
What we need at this particular time is to retool the teacher to be ready for the change. Retooling will require resources.
Okay.
And I've indicated the government which makes budgets to move has already shown good way. Why do you have to complain?
Okay, of course.
Let them give us the money. Let us, the teacher be prepared. Let the infrastructure be there.
Okay. The fear is that at the end of the day, we might end up chewing what we more than we could swallow, and that is the fear here. And coming to you, Dr. Mukhwana, coupling it up with this important question before we go to the TVET institutions, is about the aspect and the fear of those who have the vested strategic interest into this. KICD has some proposals, so as the Teacher Service Commissions, and the argument is that this is going to further derail the process of what ought to be injecting new blood into the Kenyan education system.
I think my take is where he has left, because we are asking about infrastructure as if the new system requires a different classroom from the one we have.
A whole lot of...
What we are saying is the classroom that we are using today is appropriate both for the 844 and the new system. The teacher who is teaching with a little bit of retooling, as you have said. So what we are saying is that if you ask yourself, what are the fundamental issues that we need to move to the new system? If you're talking about infrastructure in terms of the number of schools, we have over 30,000 primary schools. We have, and remember that this system is not starting from class 1 to 7. We have only done it class 1 to 3. So you can see the teacher is there, the school is there, the classroom is there, and it's not like we need a new classroom for us to roll out this new system. So when I think about it, when you talk about preparedness, I don't know what you mean, because I have seen KICD and TSC training a lot of teachers, retooling them in the new system. So we have the teachers, we have the schools, we have the classrooms, and you see, and the books are there. The books for the area where we have rolled out, the pre-primary and the primary have been released. In fact, the government has bought them and distributed them to the schools free of charge. So the learning materials are there, both for the teacher and for the student. So when we talk about preparedness, my question is, what is it? It's like we are starting a new It's like we have never been to school.
Of new
but what we are saying is the infrastructure we have is already good enough to take us to where we want to go.
Okay.
That's what I would like to say.
Okay, Dr. Mukhwana and Akello Misori, I'll come to you. Strategically sitting at an institution that perhaps has been at the focal point of Kenya's education system, we've talked about the important aspect of the competency-based curriculum in the country in the event that the forces or the voices of dissent need to also be convinced about going forward of how this is going to be important to the going forward of the country regarding the 21st century we are in and the global community sense, which is becoming a global phenomenon. But coming at you, it's about the issue the minister also raised on the mushrooming universities in the country and the quality of varsity education in Kenya, which is lessening according to the Ministry of Education, and need to bring some universities under or beneath others to perhaps bring in some sort of changes or inject that blood into the university education. What's your take on that, and how will it further change the sense of the half-baked students or graduates who are unable to fit into the job market but are equally graduating year after year perpetually?
I've had reservations about the cabinet secretary for education trying to raise issues related to establishment of institutions. You know, just like churches, educations have been the beacons of growth and development wherever we are, both physically and socially. If you have somebody who has gone to a university, that person is easily transformed to look at even aspects of politics, aspect of population change and dynamism of how this population behave.
Okay.
In my view, I think that freedom should be guaranteed on people to take on what they want to have. And if you don't want people to take history, you will at one particular time realize that history is very, very important.
Okay.
And therefore, in my view, I think that over the years, I was listening to some public speech somewhere, and I realized that if you are talking about people who have been churned out of university, that is an aspect of growth which should be celebrated. And I must say that because of Rongo University coming next to where I stay in Nyanza, you know, we have seen so many people coming to stay in Rongo region, and so many aspects of development, especially housing, even the business has really increased. This is something, when you look at near my home in Homa Bay, there's a place called Maweko Technical Institute. And because of that institute and because of the renewed enrollment, I have realized that because the government did not prepare well for the accommodation, the villagers have also tried to construct hostels and so on. And therefore, there is money in the pocket of the people. So we cannot look at education per se as an aspect that you must produce a doctor and you must produce an engineer and a lawyer. You must also produce religious leaders. Those people who are going to get education for its sake. Education must be seen in the light of for its own sake, not necessarily to produce standards. We will still have doctors. Like just the reason for which we have very celebrated universities like Harvard. We still have community universities in the US, and that is a very industrialized nation. So this aspect of curtailing the growth of universities is a mere big brother syndrome, which I don't think is going to help this.
Which might further burden, of course, the education problem in the country. But I'll come to you, Dr. Mukhwana, because there's an important aspect about the internationalization of Kenyan education. And of course, the qualification processes, you sit pretty high at that table, and you will be at the perfect position to tell us about how that is going to be effected in the country. We are not alone in this discussion. Keep sending your tweets on the hashtag NewsCompass. I'll be sampling some after this short break here on the program as we continue with the discussion that pertains to the limbo and the wars that are pitting the Kenya National Union of Teachers and the Ministry of Education with regards or regarding the competency-based curriculum rollout in the country. Stay tuned. All right, thank you so much. We're not alone in this discussion. Allow me to take a look at some of your responses on Twitter and what you are saying pertaining the important matter at hand that, of course, affects everyone. So we take a look at the tweets, and to sample some, Vera Ouma says, I'm afraid the decision to have pupils write answers inside the curriculum-based textbooks will push the cost of education up, making it unaffordable to poor families. And 254 Digital says, what about the public participation in the new curriculum? Good question. And of course, the expression of the points by the, of course, guests that we have on set regarding the topic that we are discussing, and it pertains, of course, the competency-based curriculum in the country, and we are coming back here later on the program. The hashtag too is, of course, is News Compass, and of course, keep them coming towards the tail end of the program. I'll be here again to see what you have also sent, what you continually are sending pertaining to the topic at hand. So we are into the last 22nd or 25 minutes of the program as we finish up on this important topic, and it's still with Dr. Juma Mukhwana, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, and COPET Secretary General Akello Misori. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with me. Daktari, I'll come to you on this note, and there is an important element about what regards the issue at hand, and I'm coming to this, and it pertains perhaps the helm that the helm where you use it and administer perhaps, and that regards the internationalization of Kenya's education. I've just talked about the university education that the minister believes is being lessened or has dwindled, perhaps because of the mushrooming university, therefore compromising the quality of the degrees that are channeled or the graduates. But how does that affect again when it comes to the global aspect of the Kenyan graduates and the Kenyan education system at large? How does it affect that in the negative and in the positive?
Let me just step back a little bit, and I think we forget our history a little bit too fast. Remember that when we got independence in 1963, we only had one university in the whole of East Africa, what was called the University of East Africa. And the University of Nairobi was a constituent college of that. And in 56 years, we have moved from this one university to over 70 universities and constituent colleges. And remember also, when we got independence, the population of Kenya was about 5 million people. Today, we are talking about a population of 50 million people. 10 times more. And so, when we have to contextualize what we are discussing, so that we say that I have traveled in this region. I hear this story about half-baked graduates. If you go to Rwanda today, you have 30,000 teachers teaching in Rwanda. You go to Uganda, Kenyan teachers. You go to Burundi, you go to South Africa. I took my PhD in the US. Kenyans, from this education system that we describe as half-baked, are top of the class in their masters and their PhD. So really, we may have challenges in our system. In terms of the reforms, and where I agree with the minister, is that we lost it because he said it very well. When Moi University was started, it was started as a university of forestry, environmental conservation. Egerton University was started as a university for agriculture. Kenyatta University was known as a university for education. Where we lost it is where these universities started becoming a jack of all trade. And so part of what I think is important for these reforms is to take each university back to, because we need a center of excellence in education. That's what Kenyatta University was. We need a center of excellence in agriculture and technology. That was what Jomo Kenyatta was. The problem now is that everybody moved out of this cocoon. We build structures, we moved beyond the mandate, and so we are now doing everything that under the sun. So my take is that these reforms are important, but insofar as, because we want a center of excellence in education, where you can get professors that are doing curriculum. These issues that we are arguing here about curriculum development, we should be having professors from Kenyatta University, because this is where education is. But we lost it because we moved beyond there. Now, coming to internationalization, and one of the issues that we have said, when we look at Africa today, South Africa alone has 400,000 foreign students from Africa.
Within the continent?
From the continent. Africa has a population of 1.2 billion
people.
We are now looking at our universities and we are saying we don't have enough students to study. So what do? We should not be saying because we don't have enough students, we close universities. We should say, how do you internationalize? In Kenya today, in terms of foreign students, we are talking about less than 10,000 students in our institutions. And yet, we have people from Somalia, we have people from Sudan, from Gabon, from Cameroon that want to study here. What we don't have is the environment that we have not created a conducive environment in terms of equalization. Because you see, if you come with a foreign qualification, one of the big challenges that we've had is that if you bring a qualification from Nigeria today, let's say you have taken an equivalent of a Form 4 qualification in Nigeria. When you come into Kenya, we didn't have a proper framework where this is equated to the KCSE so that the student can say, because this is equated at D+, he should start at a certificate, or a C-, he should start with a diploma, or the student. So that's what we are lacking. And that is what the Kenya National Qualification Authority is doing now, that you move into a qualification from Seychelles, from Somalia. Within 2 days, we're able to tell you that in terms of KCSE equivalent, this is where you fall, and so you should be able to go into your university and study. And I think that, and then of course we're also having a conversation with universities in terms of how do you create a conducive environment for international students, in terms of having an international office at each university, making sure that each university has good accommodation. You are not going to bring international students if these students are going to live where? Kilometer 1? Or where? So we must have good and dedicated accommodation. We must also have predictable calendars. You see, you cannot bring I cannot come from Ghana, take an air ticket to Nairobi. I reach a university and it closed yesterday. You see, it's very expensive. I'm living here. The only job why I'm here. So those are issues. At the policy level, as Kenya National Qualification Authority, we are working with various players. And the issue of immigration, of course, student visas.
It's an important aspect.
Student visas. So what I'm saying is, really, as a country, we have a few things that we need to do to create a conducive environment, because Africans want to come. Kenyan education is very well respected. So what we need is just to work on a few things: immigration, accommodation, equation and recognition of qualifications, and we should be able to move in terms of my target. The way we are looking at it is that within 5 years, we should be able to be attracting between 70 and 100,000 foreign students into Kenya, and we have that capacity within our universities.
And surely it's going to be perhaps putting up a scale of the parallel aspect here regarding what is channeled out of the country in terms of the human resource we export vis-a-vis the import that comes into the country, well-sculptured, well-equipped education, because that again points to the essence of the quality of education in the country and the harmonization aspect. And
there are two things that you need to realize. For example, Kenya is part of the East African community. Within the East African community, we have already signed for free movement of labor and goods and services. The African free trade area was just signed into. There's no way you're going to do business as Africa if students and workers can't move. So if you look at the East African community, the protocols that we have signed, and the African community, the AU vision for 2063, Africa needs to trade with itself, because you know that inter-Africa trade between African countries is only 15%. Compare that with intra-Europe trade, that is 70%. So that can only work if people, skills, students are going to move.
And that's equally an important aspect, because when you mentioned that interest sense of the African countries dealing with amongst itself the continent, and you mentioned the EU, and the fact that Britain is about to leave the European Union is causing a lot of political uncertainty in Brussels, in Belgium, because of the economic bloc that it has been in terms of backing up the finances of the European Union. Yet the bloc can do without it, but still they're worried that the future might not hold a positive, as was the case previously when it belonged to the European Union, and that's perhaps the point to which we're saying.
But you can see that they also want to move, and they also don't want to move. So they're actually backpedaling on the issue, because it is a very complicated matter.
Equally points to the essence of the political development in Westminster regarding the Brexiteers and those who are skeptical about the European Union. But the likes of Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron still believe that a European Union which is cohesive will be one that will serve that tiny little speck of earth called Europe. Akello, Misori, I'll come to you. Pointing out to this important note, there is an internal problem here, even as we talk about the internationalization of the Kenyan education, and estimates by 2020 do show that 60% of the population on the higher end will have high levels of informal jobs. There will be cases of underemployment and unemployment which will be on the rise. Yes, we want to internationalize our education system to attract foreigners to come and learn from Kenyan universities, perhaps make Kenya the safe haven when it comes to education, and wanting people to flock our beaches in the country, across everywhere, every town that mentioned, and we have now the devolved system of governance. But equally, how do we address the internal problem here about underemployment and appreciation and unemployment? And digits do show that by 2030, it's likely that 60% of the population will be unemployed.
That is a real issue even in the world arena, because just last week we were coming from the International Labour Conference, and the issue of unemployment and formal employment is a real issue. What you need to do is the reason for which we must engage formal conversation on how we want to create new jobs to make the youth who are being churned from institutions of higher learning or from middle-level colleges can also get what to do. What I don't understand is how our politics is being played and how they want to engage themselves to in governance. Because, for example, we have been talking about unemployment, yet in this country of ours, we still don't have roads, which would create thousands of jobs. We still don't have houses, because we don't live in decent houses. This is a very new horizon for us to create jobs. Because unless we just want to be engaged in traditional white-collar job areas where you want just people to be doctors, teachers, engineers, and surveyors. The engineers, you know, if we are now also closing the universities, those ones will also not be in their proportion towards what we have in terms of development. So what is there is that we have sufficient ground because food security is an issue, and that is where there is very new the horizon for creating jobs. Like now there has been an alert that we don't have even maize to buy,
yes,
and that means that we need to import. And why do you need to import when just recently in Bungoma and transfer regions and northern Western Gishu and Nandi, the maize surplus. They had surplus, and we call it the grain reserves could not absorb. It is, we must fix our politics, and once we fix our politics, then the 60% we are talking about will be absorbed, and we will be importing workforce to come from South Sudan to come and work here. Yes. Okay, given that, and the fact that you have mentioned some counties doing food surplus, and up top in North Rift, some counties, West Pokot, Turkana, Marsabit, Wajir, Garissa were all equally predicted to be experiencing drought that has displaced many people and has created food shortage, despite the government coming hands on heart saying that no Kenyan has died of hunger, which is perhaps a blatant lie completely, because Kenyans did die of hunger in those counties. But Dr. Mukhwana, coming to you on this important note again, because we are talking about the policy aspect here that regards how education is equally important. We've talked about the harmonization, but it's important also in the rollout of the Big Four agenda. And Akello did mention agriculture, which is the backbone of the economy, the driver of the economy here. And I want to start internally. I'll come to what Kenya trades and how it's trading compared to other countries, what comes in and out of the country. But when you look at, for instance, to be more specific here, and from the perspective of the Galana Kularo project, it collapsed. 7 billion Kenya shillings was pumped into it, and of course the companies that were involved did say it was as a result of frustration from the government officials who were asking for some kickbacks, the 10% kickbacks, which more or less is becoming a culture in many government institutions. How equally do we need to relook into that in terms of the integrity essence and how education can boost the agribusiness in the country, and equally the three other pillars which are part of the Big Four agenda?
Let me say this. I have worked in northern Kenya. I've worked in Marsabit, I've worked in Samburu, so I'm very familiar from Lokologo to Moyale to Isiolo, whatever. We treat drought as if it is something that we don't expect. We do know, those who have lived in Wajir, in Marsabit, in Garissa, know that you have 1 year of rain and you have 2-3 years of drought. So really, this is not something that should be taking us by surprise. I think that I have visited one of the driest areas, for example, in India. We visited as a Kenyan team. And one of the things that impressed us, you know, India is just slightly bigger than Kenya, maybe by a third of that. And India is hosting a population, my brother,
more than 1
of 1.1 something billion. China has 1.4 billion people. Those people don't starve. And the amount of rain that India gets, even the bigger area near the Himalayas where they get a lot of rain, is not nowhere compared to Kitale. We are only talking about a population of 45 million in Kenya. So really we have no excuse to talk about hunger. The technologies exist.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is the challenge that we have is how do we make smallholder farming sustainable? Because you see our production is getting smaller,
Yeah.
the farms are being subdivided, the young people are running away from farming because they think it's not good enough. And so as a country, what we need are policies to really say, how do we get young people? And then the issue of agro-processing. I was in Egypt, and I find it very interesting. If you look at Egypt, all the farming in Egypt is along the River Nile, from Aswan to Alexandria and Cairo. And Egypt is exporting wheat to Kenya. You see what I mean? I mean, the little water they have. So it's a question of technology. It is a question of also protecting. Part of the problem that we have is how do you protect Kenyan farmers? If one of the big questions that nobody has answered for me is this: how do I get a bag of maize from Brazil, travel 10,000 kilometers to Mombasa, and cost half the price
of what's produced?
How do you bring sugar from Brazil 10,000 kilometers to reach Kisumu at half the price that Misori is producing? So for me, this is where the policy comes in. What is making our production very expensive? Because if you are not competitive, and so when we come to the Big Four agenda, and I want to come there very quickly, what we are seeing here is that there's a lot of skills that are needed. For example, housing. When we look at the people who are constructing in Nairobi here, the plumbers, the electricians, the masons that are doing buildings, 95% of them have no training. They live here in Kawangware, they work there, they learn on the job. So really, I think that we have a good opportunity to retool these people, to give them skills that will then do farming, that will do construction, industrialization, for example. We are talking about university here. The reason why China is exporting to, not just to Kenya, but to everyone, is because their TVET sector has worked. When you go to the industry, the person who is producing in the industry is not a graduate. It is a TVET, it is a lower level graduate, and of course there's the issue of technology also, because then they have now brought in artificial intelligence, robots, so that are cutting down on the cost of production, because our cost of production is very high, and so if you're going to be competitive, to compete not just in the region but also against some of these issues, that we have to look at how technology we can leverage on technology so that we reduce the cost of manufacturing and so on. So we have quite a lot of issues that we can address.
And you equally mentioned the essence of the trading in here, because there's equally a big deficit when it comes to trade imbalance between, say, the Chinese and Kenyans, because the billions that is channeled out of the country is not equal to what comes into the country, and that's been the crying point of perhaps the growing Chinese influence across the continent.
And you know why? Let me just come to that a little bit before we move. Yes. You see, one of the things, we must move from being a country that exports raw materials. And this is what I've said. If you are buying a Samsung from Korea, S9, it's 100,000 Kenya shillings. How many kilograms of coffee will you export to buy one Samsung? So how many kilograms of tea do you export to buy a Toyota car from Japan? So the issue is, as an economy, that balance of trade will only go down if we also move from selling raw materials to selling manufactured products, because the value is high.
And that perhaps might remedy the problem that we continue to experience, even as that is becoming the scrambling point of world powers in the African continent. Akello, I'll come to you on this important note, because Daktari did mention an important aspect about the technical and vocational education and training, TVET, in the country, and it means hands-on skills, and it boosts the chance of one being self-employed and employs others, creating a chain of societal progress in the end as a byproduct. And do we need to embark on that mission, perhaps to relook into the education culture and refocus our attention onto that? Perhaps, as was the case with South Korea, which was at par with Kenya, but now a global economy with an influence across the globe, and other Asian giants who today have progressed economically. Do we need to retract back from our current system of education and focus now with all the energy on the vocational education training programs?
That is what we are supposed to do. And that's the direction which can spark growth and development in terms of what we want to do going forward. I want just to bring one aspect which was not been discussed here, but which formed the basis for which I thought 844 could have delivered. You remember, before the introduction of 844, we had about 18 national technical schools, which were having what we are trying to bring on board as competency-based. Because these over 18 technical institutions were having a bias towards technology. So that somebody who is engaged in technical aspect of learning knew how to draw in 3 dimensions, as from one to going to Form 3. And after at Form 3 level, people are going to building and construction, this as artisans in electricity and otherwise. So in my view, I think this is where we are supposed to go. Our system, as it were, has been proved not to be very proactive in generating innovation, because we are, as he has already indicated, that majority of those who are working in the building industry in Nairobi, for example, 95% are those who have not been given specific training. So their work cannot give them, cannot sustain them. If we developed the technical and vocational training centers well, and we have our pathways, then this will deliver on what we expect on a developed Kenya. That is where we are. In fact, I want just to say, because I don't have specific statistics, but for example, even the craze for university education is not even in Germany, which is our
the biggest economy in
Europe.
In Europe, yes.
The craze for that university education is not there. People are content and comfortable with skills that they learn. I was shocked that when you want to get a plumber in Homa Bay, for example, you cannot get a plumber with the competent skills that required to fix houses. So you see how this. We need more modules through our technical and vocational training centers, where people go for short courses, maybe for 3 months. I only want to know how to make bricks, or to lay bricks, or to mix bricks. That is what you have. So we will have people with competent skills, employable skills, and so on. In fact, that is what is lacking. That's the reason for which we are talking about 60% of the youth in Kenya are employed. They are not even employable because they don't have skills. And these skills are supposed to be derived from this institution. Yes.
Let me kindly give Dr. Mukhwana the final words briefly because of time. My director is on my neck, so we need to finish up the program. So I'll give you the brief final comments before we shut the show up.
Thank you, and I'll just pick it up from the TVET area, because one of the areas why TVET is so important, 700,000 students sit for KCSE every year. How many get C+ and above? 90,000. So 700. So it's 600,000 get less than that. And that's why the TVET sector is so important. And sometimes as a country, what depresses me is that there is so much focus on this 15% that get C+ and above, and we forget the 85%, the majority that are becoming our borders and everything. And so for me, the TVET sector really holds the key for industrializing this country. So our education system, as we started here on, to sum up what I've said, the education system that we've had has served us well, but the world is changing. And because the world is changing, we need to look at it, all the way from primary, secondary, TVET, and university, and craft a system that will serve Kenya for the next 50 years. So that's an important, and that's why reforms are important.
All right, Dr. Juma Mukhwana, Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya National Qualifications Authority, I do thank you for making time on the program. And so too is Akello Misori, the Secretary General of COPET in the country. I do appreciate your time. What an insight to an important discussion, equally at an important time. And thank you to you too for tuning into the program. And thanks for, of course, your comments and feedback on our Twitter handle. That is at Ebro TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. The short SMS code is 40920. From me and the team here in our headquarters in Lavington, we'll see you next week by the grace of God for the same show, but perhaps a totally different discussion. Bye-bye.